It took a miracle to bring this golden stool to earth and another miracle to keep it out of the hands of thieves. I am Joana, and here is another Africa's Untold Treasures. Now, the golden stool is known as Yaa Asantewaa coffee, meaning golden stool born on a Friday. This is a furniture with a birthday. And the war is known as the War of the Golden Stool. It's also known as the Yaa Asantewaa War, the third Ashanti expedition, and the Ashanti uprising. What really happened during the war? And what exactly is the golden stool? According to legend, Okomfo Anokie, high priest and one of the two chiefs founders of the Ashanti Confederacy, caused the stool to descend from the sky and land on the lap of the first Ashanti king, Osai Tutu. All these names, so I'm not pronouncing it well, sorry. With all respect, I'm writing them on the screen. This wasn't some ordinary throne. It was the Yaa Asantewaa coffee, a wooden seat wrapped in sheets of gold, believed to carry the Sumha, the collective spirit and unity of the Ashanti people. So no one, not even the Ashanti, that's the king, ever sat on this stool. But let's start with the mid-1700s first. In 1752, the British established a trading colony they called the Gold Coast on the Gulf of Guinea. It would become their hub for African trade with gold, diamond, wood, ivory, cocoa. By the late 1800s, the British continued to expand their territory into local kingdoms and forced tribal leaders to submit to their authority. They set the stage for a century of brutal clashes known as the Anglo-Ashanti Wars. 5 in total, from 1823 to the 1900s. The Ashanti won the first two wars, holding their ground with disciplined warriors and gold-fueled might, but they lost in the third war. That's around, I think, 1873 to 74, when the British burnt Kumasi, and the fourth war in 1895 to 96, leading to the exile of King Prempeh I. This left the kingdom weakened and occupied. For the Ashanti people, the golden stool had like this symbolized governing power that even the British statesman David Lloyd likened it to the Holy Grail. So why did it suddenly become of interest to the British? The British governor, Sir Frederick Mitchell Hudson, came to Kumasi one day and said, "Where is the golden stool? I am a representative of the paramount power. Why have you relegated me to an ordinary chair? Why do you not take this opportunity of my coming to bring out the golden stool for me to sit on it?" And they should have taken the opportunity of his grand arrival to bring out their golden stool for him. Please, what chair does he even use at home? That's one question to even ask. Anyway, you know, we're very good with hospitality. So sometimes we just let some things pass us and we're just smiling and trying to be diplomatic. But this provoked the armed rebellion known as the War of the Golden Stool that lasted about 6 months in the 1900s. Mind you, they fought with the British before winning to the final war is then the War of the Golden Stool. Let me tell you something interesting about this golden stool. The golden stool was not just a throne. It was a symbol of Ashanti national unity. And when it was not in use, it was placed against the wall so the souls of the dead Ashanti might rest upon it. So it connected them to their ancestry. It never touched the ground though, but always rested on a blanket. They would just spread the blanket or rug on top before they put the golden stool. People don't sit on the golden stool. It was carried on a pillow, as only the Ashanti, that's the Ashanti king, was allowed to even touch it. So just imagine that British guy saying, "Why didn't you bring it up for me?" In some ceremonies, it sat on its own throne. Do you get? Here's the funny part. The British actually thought the golden stool was just a fancy golden chair to sit on. They don't get culture now. Meanwhile, the Ashanti who were looking at them were like, "This is literally our entire spiritual identity. So please behave yourself." The cultural mismatch is part of what escalated everything. Two completely different worldviews clashing over something sacred. And we should always remember we are in Africa, not on the soil of England. Hudson even had the effrontery to say the stool belonged to the queen. Which queen? In this speech, he said, "Your king, Prempeh I, is in exile and will not return to Ashanti. His power and authority will be taken over by the representative of the Queen of Britain. And this is why they do not want you or their own people to know history, because you will get out of the delusion that they've sold to you. You get out of that bubble when you start seeing how all these patterns and stories and history came into making." Let me continue Hudson's speech to the Ashanti people. The terms of the 1874 Peace Treaty of Mena, which required you to pay for the cost of the 1874 war, have not been forgotten. You have to pay with interest the sum of £160,000 a year. Wait, so that you understand the impact of this, the impact of what this had on your ancestors if you are from Ghana. Let me bring it to today. Today, that money, that £160,000 in the 1880s is worth approximately £25 million a year, which is over 384 million Ghanaian cedis. Imagine that that's what you have to pay every year. Wait, I've not finished. Today, you have about 35 million people that live in Ghana. So it is basically taxpayer head come from Ghana, return back to the British Empire to feed British people now. 384 million Ghanaian cedis. And that is literally more than Ghana's GDP. And you will tell me enslavement trade ended. Oh yeah, let us go back to the golden stool. The people realized that the British were not just expanding territory, they were now trying to claim the very symbol of Ashanti's existence. independence. This shifted their mindset from just resisting colonial pressure to protecting the stool of their people at every cost. The stakes became spiritual, not just political. So in the 1900s, when Sir Frederick Hudson, the governor of the Gold Coast, demanded to be allowed to sit on a golden stool and ordered that a search for it has to be conducted, it was so offensive to the people of Ghana that a foreigner will come and demand their most precious and sacred object to sit on it. So they did not just fold their hands and grumble. Yaa Asantewaa, a queen mother, assembled all the soldiers she could find to fight against the British. She said, "Now I have seen that some of you fear to go forward to fight for your king. So if it were in the brave days, the days of Osai Tutu, Okomfo, Anoke, and Opokuware, chiefs would not sit down to see their king taken away without firing a shot. No foreigner, Brony, could have dared to speak to the chief of the Ashanti in the way the governor spoke to you, to your chiefs this morning." She was really like challenging them. Is it true that the bravery of the Ashanti is no more? I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it. I must say this. If you, the men of Ashanti, will not go forward, then I will. We the women will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight. We will fight to the last of us fall on the battlefield. So you imagine you as the man sitting there hearing that, you'll be like, babe, okay, please, women, we'll follow you, let's go. All this should be made as films. This is the time in the film where you start hearing that drum roll. After Yaa Asantewaa addressed them, even the men were immediately encouraged. And so they formed their own machinery with which they intended to fight the British. That alone is even enough. The British wanted to take the stool, but the Ashanti people had hidden it. The British sent search parties into the village to search for the stool, but to no avail. And now it gets even more interesting, because later, after a final stand at Mampong, Yaa Asantewaa and key chiefs were betrayed and captured during a parley gone wrong, exiled to the Seychelles alongside Prempeh I. So let's fast forward to 1921, when African rail workers discovered the stool and then they stripped some of the gold ornaments off the stool. They were taken to the protective custody by the British before being tried according to the local custom and sentenced to death. And actually, why not? And well, imagine something the people years ago fought to protect with their life from the British. They fought for it, they hid it. You now, next generation, you come and you strip it off the gold. You trust the British now, they will put their mouth in what does not concern them, because these people were supposed to be sentenced. The British, they intervened and the group were instead banished. And this is also a way to actually already divide people, right? So now you've saved those people from their own people for doing something that was punishable. You will create many sides. There are many sides to stories anyway. So now, those people will tell their grandchildren how the British saved them from death sentence from their own people, but they will forget to tell that they were thieves. Do you get? So that's why when you hear stories, you have to really exercise critical thinking. Different sides. There's never one story. There are different sides to a story. I can imagine those people for whom the British intervened that were now banished. They will always cry about how their own people banished them. And sometimes not telling the whole truth is worse than a lie. They will leave that tiny details of their theft after their ancestors had died to safeguard that stool. Do you get? It was even used in the ceremony to crown Osai Tutu Agyeman Prempeh II. So what about the British? It's good to know that during the war, the Ashanti continued to snipe at the defenders, cut the telegraph wires, blockade food supplies, and attack relief columns. So they were actively resistant, blocking all roads leading to the town with 21 log barricades 6 feet high within loopholes to fire through, hundreds of yards long, and so solid that they cannot be damaged or affected by gun or cannon fire. So they had their own defense mechanism and tactics. I'm just seeing this film happening. Good, you guys should join me on this storytelling journey so that we can make this film. We can make these films. Anyway, as supplies ran low and disease took their toll on the people, a rescue party of about 700 people arrived in June. They realized that it was necessary to escape from the trap and to preserve the remaining food for the wounded and the sick. So some of the healthier men, along with Hudson, his wife, and I think over 100 of Hausas who were fighting for them. You know, the British has already, scattered Africa, so they had their own local soldiers. We're fighting for them, made a break on the 23rd of June, meeting up with the rescue force. So this rescue force helped them. They were evacuated. The war cost the British and their allies approximately 1,000 fatalities in total. Victory tasted hollow for the British. No stool, no soul conquered. Well, at the end, the British, they took over. Yaa Asantewaa, she was exiled till her death in 1821. At the age of 81, she lived a long life a bit. She became a legend, the woman who stirred down an empire and won the only prize that mattered. The stool was not a mere physical object and symbol of power, but also a metaphysical and spiritual representation of the soul of the Ashanti people. And today, the golden stool rests in Kumasi, and it's still being used for crowning ceremonies. So I'm so happy that this is another Africa's Untold story with a happy end. I'm Joana. I love happy endings, especially when an African spiritual symbol remains on African soil.